Hey y'all, welcome to Ace Culinary. I get the idea I want to call it Quarantine Kitchen because we're all in quarantine and it's odd talking to a camera teaching y'all how to cook because I'm not a Food Network star. But anyway, what we're going to try to do each week is cook some recipes, cook some things that are tasty, hopefully teach you a new technique or how to cook something in particular. This week we're going to make rice with sausage. Back when I was in the Rodeo Association, we used to make this dish for, I don't know, sometimes as many as 1,000, 1,200 people in a night. So I've got a little bit of experience with this. Let's go through the things that should be in your box that you got from Ace. You should have some long grain rice. You should have some chicken broth in there. A bag with some celery and carrots, looks like. Should have an onion and then butter, and I think she gave you some olive oil. I don't have any, so I'm just going to use butter, which will be fine. And you need some salt and pepper. Whatever you got in the cabinet will work well. I don't know if she gave you any or not. And then you should have a little package that's got a couple of bay leaves in it and some Creole seasoning, which will make this dish taste good. And then should have a package of link sausage that, if you look on the label, it's fully cooked. So in this episode we don't have to worry about learning how to cook sausage. We can do that and on another time, learn how to poach sausage and then grill it off and make it tasty so that it doesn't bust and burn and all those sorts of things. I'm going to throw this back in the refrigerator so that it got a visitor. Throw this back in the refrigerator so that it stays cold until we need it. All right, since we're not here at school and I don't know what you've got at home, let's talk about some of the things that you're going to need to cook this dish. You're going to need some kind of a fairly large pot with the lid. It can be almost anything. This one I think is 3 quarts, and that should be fine for this dish. I wouldn't go any smaller, but if you got something a little bit bigger, that's okay. I just don't want it so big that the rice gets really thin in the bottom of the pot. It won't, but you don't want to stack it up really deep either. So it's kind of like Goldilocks and the 3 Bears. It's got to be just right. You're going to need some kind of measuring cup for measuring your rice and your chicken broth. If you have a peeler, there's less chance of blood whenever you're taking care of your carrots and things. You're going to need a couple of kitchen knives. Now I have a chef's knife I like to use, but you just need some kind of knife that you can cut up your vegetables with. No blood. That's one of the rules. We'll talk about knife skills, but if your knives are dull, that makes it more difficult. You'll need some kind of a spoon to stir your goodness with. You'll need something to open your chicken broth. Get that out. If you make a mess, I tend to make a mess, maybe you'll need to have a wash rag or something where you can wipe things off. As we cut these vegetables up, you need something to put them in, some kind of a bowl, cereal bowl, stainless bowl, whatever you've got there around the house. And you're going to have some scraps. I'm going to try to be neat so that I don't have to spend a lot of time cleaning the kitchen. So I'm going to put the scraps back in the little bag that the food came in, and I can take that with me when I leave. Alright, so let's get started. What do we need to do here? It says you need 1.5 cups of long grain rice. So get a measuring cup where you can measure that. I was just thinking about this today. I'm going to call an audible because somebody's got to eat this food. And my wife and I, 1.5 cups of rice makes a fairly good sized portion, and that's more than my wife and I will probably eat. So I'm just going to use 1 cup. But we'll talk about this ratio. Whenever you're cooking rice, you need, or at least long grain rice, like most people are going to get at the grocery store. The ratio is 1 cup of rice, 2 cups of liquid. And there's a lot of ways you can cook rice. You can use a lot of things for liquid. You can use water. You can use chicken broth. All sorts of things that you can use that we'll talk about over time as we cook more things that have rice with it. But for right now, your recipe calls for 1.5 cups of rice. Twice that's 3 cups of liquid, so you'll need 3 cups of chicken broth. Each one of these cans is about 2 cups. So you can measure it out with your measuring cup. What if you don't have a measuring cup? If you're using 1.5 cups of rice, then you'll use 1.5 cans of this chicken broth. Since I'm using 1 cup of rice, I'm going to use 1 can of chicken broth. All right, now it says here we need to cut some things up. So I'm just going to begin. Let's cut up this onion. Now, if you haven't cut up an onion before, the way I usually do it is cut the top off of the onion and then cut the root off, but I don't cut it off too deeply. That way it still kind of holds together while it's in there. Then you can cut it in half. Let's see, well, the recipe calls for about 1/2 cup of chopped onion, which should be about half of one of these onions. And here's the thing, y'all. Don't go grab a measuring cup and start measuring this stuff and be worried about whether or not you have exactly 1/2 cup of onion, because geez, you know, we're not trying to find the cure for the Rona. We're cooking, and I like onion, and half an onion sounds just about right for me. All right, so how do you chop up an onion? Well, if you got a chef knife, it's a little easier. Be sure when you're cutting, keep your fingers curled under, because the rule's no blood. And if you keep your fingers curled under, you won't cut your finger. And I'm not going to try to do it really fast like on the Food Network, because, hey, I'm not a Food Network star. But that's okay. It doesn't take long to cut up an onion. So slice it longitudinally, and then you can come back across. This is about a 1/4 inch dice or so. I don't know if that's really diced or chopped. I didn't go to culinary school like Ms. Work did, but you can see what I'm doing. Anyway, there you go. There's a nice, probably 1/2 cup of onion, and put that in whatever container that you have for it there. All right, and then what else we have? Carrots and celery. So I got into my sack. In case you're wondering, I washed this ahead of time so that I wouldn't have to take time to run to the sink and wash things. So into that's a little suspect looking, and so I'm going to cut that off. Now with the greens on the end, you can chop those up and eat them. There's nothing wrong with that. Sometimes people don't enjoy that quite as much. I know some folks in my family would cut that off, and some would be okay eating it. So I cut about half of it off. How about that? All right, just cleaning that up a little bit. Now you just want to cut this up into similar size pieces that you had for your onion. All right. So run your knife through it. This is, you know, we're not going to get a ruler out and measure these things to see if you cut everything exactly the right size. But there we go. And there's our celery, and that looks like about 1/2 cup, doesn't it? Looks good to me. I mean, what are you going to do? Measure it out, and if you've got a little bit left over that's more than 1/2 cup, what are you going to do? Throw that good food away? Heck no. We're going to eat it. So, there we go. Now this is a bodacious sized carrot, and I think our recipe says that, what? About 1 carrot's 1/2 cup. Whew, that's a big old carrot. So, you know what I think I'm going to do? I'm going to cut this rascal in half, and I'll save half of that for a snack later. Remember your vegetable peeler? Now just put that in your hand, and you know, you can do this with a knife. You know, if you wash it really well, there's nothing wrong with eating the skin on these things. It's up to you. I've always peeled my carrots. I think I like it a little bit better. I think it sounds a little more attractive to the folks at my house, that they're sure that you've either washed it really well or peeled it. But anyway, so there you go, peeling a carrot. Doesn't take just a minute. Be sure and keep your area clean. All right, now if you try to cut things up on a cutting board that are round, they're going to roll around and there'll be blood, which is bad. So I'm going to cut that thing where it won't roll around. This is a pretty big carrot, so I'm going to cut it into quarters. All right, there we go. And then I'm going to dice this up. You know, if you do this quicker at home, great. If it takes you longer, well, it's not a contest, you know. We're just cooking here. I'm allowing myself about 45 minutes to an hour to cook this meal. So if that helps you a little bit with your planning. So there we go. We've got our vegetables cut up, and I'll work on keeping my area wiped up, clean here. If you're cooking at home, whether you're cleaning or somebody else is, geez, people clean up as you go, because that way when dinner's over, you don't have a big sink full of dirty dishes that are staring at you that you got to get up and go mess with. So clean up as you go. It's not that hard. It just takes a minute, and then you have less to do later when you're full and happy and don't want to have to be in there washing dishes. All right, so I think that's got us done here. I'm gonna stop the camera. We're gonna go over here to the stove and saute these things up and get this rice cooking.